Commander Alara Voss gripped the edge of the observation deck as the abyssal dawn plunged deeper into the alien ocean world. Outside the reinforced viewports, pale blue light barely penetrated the inky black waters, and strange, drifting creatures moved just beyond visibility. This world, officially catalogued as Xylaris 9, had been deemed unremarkable by most human explorers. But the sensors had picked up something unusual, a deep trench in the northern hemisphere, unlike anything in human charts. Curiosity had driven them here, as it always did. Alara's crew had been cautious. Lieutenant Merck, the ship's chief engineer, leaned over the instrument panel, eyes narrowed. "Commander, the readings are off the charts. The trench seems to, I don't even know. Gravity is fluctuating, pressure is spiking." Alara nodded, her jaw tight. "We expected the unusual. This is why we came. Keep monitoring but maintain depth at safe limits. We're not here to die." A sudden jolt shook the ship, a warning klaxon blaring. Red emergency lights bathed the deck in an ominous glow. "Hull breach detected," Merck shouted, fingers flying over the controls. Alarms echoed through the corridors as the abyssal dawn lurched violently. The ship had entered a massive, swirling vortex, a naturally occurring gravity whirlpool unlike anything humans had catalogued. It wasn't mechanical failure or sabotage. It was the planet itself, alive with forces beyond their understanding. Alara grabbed a nearby handrail as the ship twisted. "Brace for impact," she shouted over the roar of rushing water and the shrill klaxons. The ship's reinforced hull strained against the immense pressure, metal groaning like a living thing. Crew members were thrown from consoles, sliding along the floor before slamming against bulkheads. The pod bay doors burst open with a violent hiss, and the escape pods automatically ejected. Alara sprinted toward her pod, water leaking through fissures in the hull. Merck reached her side, dragging a struggling technician with him. "Commander, we're not going to make it." Alara shook her head, ignoring the fear clawing at her chest. "We will. Humans weren't made to be dinner." She yanked open the pod hatch and shoved Merck and the technician inside, sealing it just as the rest of the ship began to tear apart. Inside the pod, the three clung to straps as the pod was pulled down into darkness. The pressure gauges spiked, the hull creaking as if it were screaming. Through the small viewport, strange shadows flickered past. Massive shapes, smooth and glimmering in the sparse light, moved with terrifying grace. The crew didn't know it yet, but the creatures were intelligent, observing them, judging them. They assumed these humans were weak, nothing more than struggling prey. Alara kept her focus. The pod's AI system beeped weakly. "Commander Voss," it said in a calm, mechanical voice, "structural integrity at 30%. Oxygen reserves at 45%. Estimated survival time 50 minutes. She gritted her teeth. "Then we buy time, we do not die here." "Not today." Scavenging the pod's limited resources, Alara checked the emergency systems. She rerouted power to the secondary thrusters, reinforced the outer hull with automated compression protocols, and patched minor leaks with sealant nanofibers. Merck worked beside her, following her commands with a mixture of fear and awe. Even in the chaos, he trusted her decisions. She had a way of thinking under pressure that no AI could match. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. They had lost track. The pod shuddered violently, and a massive shadow appeared beyond the viewport. Alara's stomach sank. The shape was enormous, easily hundreds of meters long, with smooth, reflective skin and multiple appendages curling like whips. The alien had no eyes, but somehow it seemed aware of them. It hovered, testing, analyzing before retreating into the dark, leaving only a ripple of terror. "They're intelligent," Alara whispered. "They're not just animals." Merck swallowed hard. "They left us. They could have crushed us in an instant." "Not today," Alara said again. "We're humans. That counts for something." They descended further, past the region where any light could penetrate. The pod system strained to maintain life support in the crushing pressure. Oxygen was precious, and Alara calculated every breath, every movement. She noticed a faint glow below, a pulsating light in the abyss. Curious and desperate, she adjusted the pod's course. As they approached, the glow resolved into a massive crystalline structure, emanating a soft, pulsing energy. The pod's instruments went haywire near it, compasses spinning and displays flickering. Alara's mind raced. An energy source sentient, perhaps. That's what they're guarding. She felt a thrill of hope. If she could harness that, maybe they could turn the tables. But the moment was shattered by another jolt. From the shadows, long tendrils struck the pod, scraping along the hull. Metal shrieked under the attack. Merck scrambled to maintain control while Alara activated the emergency thrusters, pushing the pod away. The creatures were learning, adapting to human behavior, but they were still cautious, intrigued by the audacity of these fragile intruders. "We can't outrun them forever," Merck said, his voice tight. "They're faster, stronger," Alara cut him off. "Then we don't outrun them, we outsmart them. Remember, humans thrive where others fail. That's what makes us dangerous." They maneuvered around the crystalline energy source, using its pulses to confuse the predators. The aliens hesitated, unsure of the humans' intent. Alara's mind worked furiously, devising strategies with only scraps of information. She realized the energy source might be a key to communication or control if only they could figure it out. Time became a blur. The pod was tossed by currents, attacked by creatures, and threatened by the abyss itself. Every second was a fight for survival. Alara's hands ached from constant adjustments, but she never let panic take over. Panic would get them killed. Logic, ingenuity, and courage were their only weapons. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the pod. A panel gave way, and seawater began to seep in. Alara moved quickly, sealing the breach with a combination of nanofibers and mechanical clamps. Merck glanced at her, wide-eyed. "How do you stay so calm?" Alara smiled grimly. "Because I have to. If I panic, we die. Humans survive when others fail, remember." As the pod drifted near the glowing structure, they realized it wasn't just a crystal. It was a network of sentient energy, pulsing rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat. Merck stared at it in awe. "It's alive somehow." "Yes," Alara whispered, "and it's watching us. I can feel it, but we can use it. We have to." The pod's AI alerted them to another approaching creature. Its long tendrils lashed out, striking the pod with terrifying force. The hull shuddered violently, but Alara was ready. She activated a sequence she had improvised from ship schematics, creating a pulse of counter-energy that disrupted the alien's nervous system. The creature recoiled, confused, giving them a brief window to maneuver. The pod darted past the creature, toward a small alcove in the trench wall. They found temporary refuge, breathing heavily, bodies tense but alive. Alara knew it was only temporary. The aliens would return, and they would be more cunning next time. But they had survived the first encounter, and that was a start. Alara sat back, staring at the pulsing energy ahead. This world, this abyss, was a trap. Yet in the heart of it, humans had a chance. If they could learn the rhythm of the energy source, understand the alien intelligence, they might not just survive, they might thrive. She looked at Merck and the technician, who were exhausted, pale, and trembling. "Listen," she said firmly, "we're alive right now because we refuse to die. That's human nature. Other species see weakness and try to crush it. We see danger and find a way through it. That's why we'll make it." For a long moment they sat in silence, listening to the deep hum of the abyss, feeling the weight of the water pressing in on them. Then, slowly, hope began to stir. Not blind hope, but the kind that came from understanding one simple truth: humans were adaptable. Humans were clever. Humans survived against all odds. The pod systems flickered. Oxygen was dropping faster than expected. Pressure was rising. The creatures were circling, studying. The energy source pulsed with increasing intensity. It was as if the abyss itself were alive, watching them, testing them. Alara tightened her grip on the control panel. Then we answer its test. We don't run, we don't scream, we survive. Humans don't die in the deep, not today. As the pod floated in the eerie glow, the first part of their story ended, but the real challenge was only beginning. The trench was alive, the creatures were intelligent, and somewhere in the darkness, the pulse of energy waited. Alara knew that escaping this abyss would require more than courage. It would demand the full range of human ingenuity, audacity, and unyielding will. And she was ready to fight, not just to survive, but to prove that humans belonged anywhere they chose to go, even in the darkest depths of an alien ocean. Alara Voss floated in the cramped pod, the pulse of the energy source vibrating faintly through the hull. Every creak of metal, every flicker of the dim lights, reminded her that they were alive by a thread. The creatures circling above had not attacked directly yet, but their presence was constant, like a shadow that moved and watched. She knew they were intelligent. They were learning. Merc leaned back against the wall, breathing heavily. "Commander, how do you even think we survive this? There's nothing here for us to fight with. The pod, the energy source, it's all alien. And those things, they're smarter than anything we've ever seen." Alara studied the glowing pulses ahead. "Exactly," she said. "They're smart, and they can predict patterns, but humans are unpredictable. That's how we survive. That's how we fight when the odds are against us. We find ways no one else imagines." Her words seemed to give Merc some strength, though he still shivered. The technician, a young woman named Lyra, was silent, staring at the viewport. Shadows of the creatures twisted and moved outside, their forms impossible to fully comprehend. Alara knew they couldn't just float here. Oxygen levels were dropping, pressure rising, and if they remained passive, they would be sitting targets. She activated the pod systems to scan the surrounding trench more carefully. The pulse of energy beneath them was irregular, almost like a heartbeat. She realized it was not just a power source, it was communicating. "They're trying to talk to us," she said quietly. "Or at least test us." Merc shook his head. "Test us, they could crush us in a second." Alara's eyes hardened. "Then we pass the test." She began to devise a plan. The pod systems had some experimental emitters designed for deep-sea communication. With some improvisation, she could try to mimic the pulse of the energy source. It was risky. If she failed, the creatures would attack. But if she succeeded, it might give them a chance to manipulate the intelligence behind the predators. Hours passed in tense concentration. Every adjustment she made to the emitters was carefully calculated, every flicker of light outside observed. Slowly, the pulse of the energy source began to respond to their signals. It was subtle at first, almost imperceptible, but it grew stronger, a rhythmic resonance that filled the pod with a vibrating hum. "They're listening," Alara whispered. "They know we're here and they're curious." The first real confrontation came suddenly. A massive tendril smashed against the pod, shaking it violently. Lyra screamed, clinging to a strap. Merc braced against the hull. Alara activated the emitters, sending a sequence of pulses timed to match the energy network's rhythm. The tendril hesitated, recoiling slightly as if confused. The pod shuddered but remained intact. "They're learning," Alara said, "and so are we." For the next few hours, they tested their understanding of the pulses. Each interaction was dangerous, but it revealed patterns in the alien intelligence's behavior. The energy network was not just controlling the predators, it was evaluating threats, analyzing patterns, and adjusting. Yet, it responded to creativity. It could not anticipate the full scope of human ingenuity. Merc and Lyra began to recover some of their composure, marveling at Alara's calm. "You really believe humans can beat this?" Merc asked. "I don't just believe," Alara said firmly. "I know. We always find a way. We always survive." Then, a breakthrough occurred. The pulse of energy began to synchronize with the pod's emitters. It wasn't complete communication yet, but it was a start. They had established a temporary connection, a way to manipulate the network's attention. The predators slowed their movements, circling more cautiously, responding to the signals. Alara realized this was their opportunity. If they could lead the predators away, or at least keep them distracted, they could explore the trench and search for a more permanent solution. She mapped a course deeper into the abyss, toward a structure that appeared partially buried in the trench wall, a ruin of some kind, unlike anything humans had encountered. The journey was perilous. The currents in the trench were violent, the pod tossed and pulled like a toy. Tendrils lashed at the hull, and Alara had to constantly adjust power and maneuvering to avoid catastrophic damage. Merck monitored the pod's systems, his hands moving with increasing confidence as he followed Alara's directions. Finally, they reached the ruined structure. It was enormous, carved from stone-like material but interlaced with crystalline growths that pulsed faintly, resonating with the energy source. It seemed abandoned yet alive. Lyra whispered in awe, "It's like it's waiting for us." Alara stepped closer to the viewport, studying the formation. This might be what the network was guarding, or maybe what it was protecting. She tapped a few commands into the pod's controls, extending small manipulator arms to touch the crystals. They vibrated, responding to her presence. The pulse of energy grew stronger, almost like recognition. Then the creatures returned. A massive shadow blotted out the faint glow. Several tendrils lashed toward the pod, and a collision sent the pod spinning violently. Alara activated the emitters, sending a rapid pulse sequence. The creatures hesitated as if confused, and the pod stabilized. "They adapt," Merck said, wide-eyed. "Yes," Alara replied, "but they haven't learned us yet." The next hours were a delicate balance of survival and experimentation. The pod moved closer to the crystals, mapping their structure and recording energy patterns. Every misstep could provoke the predators into attack. Yet with each pulse, each sequence, they learned more. Humans were small, fragile, and underestimated, but they were clever, audacious, and unpredictable. A breakthrough came when the network reacted strongly to a specific pattern. It pulsed in a rapid, almost musical sequence, which seemed to influence the movements of the predators. Alara realized that, for the first time, they could control the creatures indirectly, not through strength, but through ingenuity and understanding. Merck's voice trembled with excitement. "Commander, we could use them. If we can control the network, we can control them." Alara nodded. "Exactly, that's why humans survive. We don't just fight, we think, we adapt. We turn every danger into an opportunity." But the success was short-lived. Another, larger creature emerged from the shadows, more massive than the rest. It seemed unaffected by the pulse sequences. The network pulsed erratically, as if in warning. The creature struck and the pod's hull groaned under the impact. Alara's mind raced. She had only one chance. Using a combination of the pod's emitters and the natural currents, she created a trap. She lured the creature toward a narrow crevice in the trench wall and sent a pulse sequence, timed to trigger a controlled collapse of loose rock. The creature hit the rocks and was momentarily trapped, giving the pod just enough space to maneuver. "That was too close," Lyra whispered, shaking. "No," Alara said firmly. "That was human ingenuity, and it's why we survive." They continued deeper into the trench, following the crystalline structure that seemed to resonate with the energy network. The ruins were vast, with tunnels and chambers extending farther than the pod's lights could reach. It was ancient, possibly left by a civilization long gone. The network pulsed in response to their presence, almost like it was guiding them. Alara realized that the ruins might hold the key to controlling the predators permanently. If they could integrate with the network through the crystals, humans could turn the planet's deadliest creatures into allies, or at least neutralize the threat. Hours turned into what felt like days. The pod's oxygen was dwindling, the hull battered, and the crew exhausted. Yet they pressed on, driven by the same human instinct that had guided them through countless perils across space. The abyss was hostile, the predators intelligent, and the energy network unpredictable. But humans thrived in the impossible. They survived when others failed. Finally, they reached the heart of the ruins. A massive crystalline formation pulsed with intense energy, surrounded by intricate carvings and mechanisms. Alara understood that this was the central hub of the network. Every predator, every pulse, every signal was connected here. "This is it," she said. "If we can control this, we control the abyss." The network responded immediately. Pulses of energy shot through the crystals and the predators froze mid-motion, circling cautiously. It was a moment of tense silence. Then, as if acknowledging Alara, the central crystal pulsed in a steady, rhythmic beat, like a heartbeat in sync with her own. Merc gasped. It recognizes you." Alara shook her head in disbelief. "It recognizes humans. It sees that we're not just prey. That we can think, adapt, survive. It sees that we're dangerous, and maybe, just maybe, it respects that." As the pod floated in the center of the chamber, surrounded by the quiet, tense forms of the predators, Alara realized something profound. Humans were fragile, yes. Outnumbered, yes. But their greatest strength was not muscle or technology alone. It was courage, audacity, and the ability to think where others could not. They had survived the impossible, and for the first time, the abyss seemed to understand that survival was not optional. Alara took a deep breath. The next step would be the hardest, integrating fully with the network, turning this ancient, alien intelligence into an advantage for humans. The predators watched. The pulse of energy thrummed beneath them, and the abyss waited. But one thing was clear. Humans were no longer just prey. Humans were a force to be reckoned with. And as long as Alara Voss lived, she would make sure that, in the deep, humans would never be left to die. Not today. Alara Voss floated in the center of the crystalline hub, the pod's lights reflecting off the pulsing energy all around. The predators, massive and alien, circled at a distance, frozen in a state of cautious observation. The energy network, once an incomprehensible force, now seemed to respond to human presence. It pulsed rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat syncing with her own, acknowledging their persistence, their ingenuity. Merc and Lyra stared wide-eyed at the crystals. "Commander, we actually have a chance," Merc whispered. "Yes," Alara replied firmly. "But this is only the beginning. If we fail now, the abyss will kill us. If we succeed, humans survive and thrive where no one thought we could." She activated the pod's manipulator arms, reaching carefully toward the central crystal. The energy pulsed in response, brightening and dimming in a sequence that seemed like recognition. Alara tapped into the pod's emitters, sending carefully timed pulses to mirror the rhythm of the network. It was delicate work, each mistake potentially lethal. The predators twitched nervously, confused but restrained. Suddenly, a massive shadow moved faster than before. One of the larger predators had broken free from the network's influence. Its multiple appendages whipped toward the pod, striking violently. The pod shook, alarms blaring. Merc scrambled to stabilize the hull while Lyra clung to her seat. Alara didn't panic. She tapped the emitters rapidly, sending a counterpulse sequence. The predator froze mid-attack, tendrils suspended in the water as if paralyzed. It twitched again, slowly, but the rhythm of the central crystal stabilized it once more. Humans had learned to manipulate the network, even if only partially. "This is it," Alara said. "We either take control or we die trying, and I'm not dying here." She adjusted the emitters, synchronizing more fully with the pulse of the hub. The energy rippled through the crystals, cascading outward. The predators froze, their movements now entirely dictated by the rhythmic pulses. Alara realized she could guide them like instruments, not as enemies but as extensions of the network itself. Merc gasped. "Commander, we're doing it. We're actually controlling them." Alara allowed herself a brief nod but didn't relax. "It's temporary. The network is intelligent. It learns. We need to integrate fully or it will adapt and fight back." The pod maneuvered closer to the hub, and Alara extended her arms further. She realized the network's pulses were a form of language, a sequence of energy patterns that conveyed commands, intentions, and responses. Humans had never encountered anything like this, but the concept was familiar: communication through rhythm and reaction. She began experimenting. She sent complex pulse sequences, combining tempo, frequency, and intensity. The predators reacted, mimicking the patterns, following the rhythm, and even circling in formations that suggested understanding. Merrick's face lit up. "Commander, they're learning us. They're responding to human thought." "Yes," Alara said, her voice firm but calm. "Humans survive where others fail because we do more than react. We adapt, improvise, and innovate. They're about to learn that lesson." Hours passed in tense concentration. The pod became an orchestra conductor, and the predators became instruments, responding to each adjustment of pulse and timing. Slowly, the network began to integrate the humans' input, creating a two-way system of communication. Alara realized that the network could now anticipate human ingenuity, but humans could anticipate the network as well. Then came the real test. The central crystal pulsed violently, sending a shockwave through the hub. The predators surged, now moving with coordinated aggression. They were testing the humans' control, challenging their authority. The pod shook violently, systems warning of imminent failure. Alara's mind raced. She tapped into every lesson learned from past encounters, every improvised trick, and every pulse sequence she had developed. The pod emitted a rapid series of pulses that mirrored human neural patterns, something alien but intuitive. The predators froze, hesitation in their movements. The network pulsed back, slower, almost contemplative. It was acknowledging human intelligence, not as prey but as equals. Merrick's eyes were wide with disbelief. "Commander, they respect us." Alara didn't smile. She couldn't. There was still work to do. "Not respect," she said. "Recognition. They know we are dangerous because we refuse to die. That's what makes humans humans." Using the synchronized pulses, Alara guided the predators toward the abyss wall, away from the pod, and then manipulated the network to stabilize the central crystal. She realized that with enough control, they could neutralize the immediate threat entirely, even turn the predators into a defensive mechanism if needed. It took hours, each pulse sequence more complex than the last. Merrick and Lyra worked tirelessly, adjusting the pod systems to keep up with Alara's commands. Sweat dripped from their faces, hearts pounding, every nerve tense. Yet in the midst of chaos, something incredible happened. The predators began to follow human guidance without question. They no longer attacked. They became protectors, guardians of the hub rather than hunters. Alara allowed herself a deep breath. "We've survived the impossible," she said quietly. "We've turned the hunters into allies. This is what humans do. We survive, we adapt, and we thrive." The hub pulsed in response, brightening as if acknowledging her words. The energy network, once an inscrutable force of nature, now seemed to embrace human ingenuity. Alara knew that they had not just survived, they had earned the right to influence this world. But there was still one challenge left. The energy network extended deep into the trench, controlling countless predators and responding to unknown dangers. Humans had to prove that they could operate independently within the system, without collapsing under pressure. Alara devised a plan. Using the pod's manipulators and emitters, she extended pulses outward, gradually transferring control from the hub to herself. She had to maintain a delicate balance. Too much control, and the network could reject them. Too little, and the predators could attack. Each sequence was precise, tested against both intuition and observed behavior. Hours stretched into what felt like days. Merck and Lyra monitored vital signs, adjusting oxygen levels, hull pressure, and energy outputs. They moved in perfect synchronization, a human team functioning as one organism in the hostile abyss. Finally, Alara felt the connection stabilize. The network pulsed gently, predators circling calmly, energy flowing smoothly through the crystals. The abyss, once a deadly and incomprehensible place, had been tamed by human ingenuity and courage. They had not just survived, they had become part of the ecosystem, the first humans to interact with this alien intelligence on equal footing. Alara looked at Merck and Lyra. This is more than survival, we've proven something. Humans aren't weak. We aren't just fragile explorers thrown into impossible situations. We are clever, persistent, and audacious. We adapt where others fail. Today, we've shown that humans can thrive even in the deadliest depths. Merck smiled, exhausted but exhilarated. We really did it. We actually did it. Yes, Alara said, and we're not done yet. This planet, this network, it's dangerous, yes, but it's also an opportunity. Humans survive, adapt, and use what others fear. We've only scratched the surface of what we can do here. They prepared the pod for ascent. The journey back to the surface would be perilous, but with the network partially under human guidance, the predators now allowed them passage. Each movement had to be calculated, precise, but Alara's confidence never wavered. Humans were always the underdogs, but underdogs with ingenuity, audacity, and relentless will. As they neared the surface, the glow of the shallow waters ahead was a welcome sight. The abyss had tested them in every possible way, but humans had proven that intelligence, courage, and adaptation could overcome even the most alien of threats. Alara looked out at the dark expanse of water behind them, the vast trench stretching endlessly below. Somewhere in the depths, the network pulsed, alive and aware, but now aligned, if only partially, with human intent. She knew that other humans would come to this planet, and when they did, they would find the abyss not just deadly, but navigable. They would find that humans could survive, adapt, and dominate challenges no one else could. Lyra spoke softly. "Do you think anyone will believe this story?" Alara smiled, a rare, tired smile. "They'll have to. Humans survive where others fail. That's the story we always tell. And now we've lived it." The pod broke through the last layer of the abyss, and light flooded the cabin. The surface of the alien ocean stretched endlessly, calm and deceptively serene. The predators remained below, obedient to the network but no longer threats. The energy pulses continued, faint but steady, a heartbeat of the deep that humans had learned to navigate. Alara felt a surge of pride. Humans were fragile, yes. Outnumbered, yes. But never weak, never predictable, and certainly never finished when danger arose. They had been left to die in the deep, but humans had said, "Not today." The pod transmitted a signal back to human space. Data, coordinates, and observations flooded in. Others would follow. But now the humans who survived the abyss carried not just knowledge but a message. Humanity endures. Humanity adapts. Humanity conquers, not through sheer force but through courage, ingenuity, and willpower. And somewhere in the deep, the energy network pulsed in rhythm with human defiance. Humans had faced the impossible, and humans had won.